just some practical things and some things from my own experience that were helpful to me and might help some other people. This may be a no-brainer for some people, but on the other hand, it may help some people out there. A few years ago, I was doing very few lifts because I had a lot of shoulder pain and a lack of shoulder mobility. So there was just very few exercises that I was comfortable doing that didn't hurt me and bother me and feel like it was doing damage to my shoulders. And I had thought, when I was a young man, I competed in drug-free powerlifting. I started working out in 1983 when I was in 10th grade consistently. And before I graduated high school, I did a 400 touch and go bench press. And then after that, I got into powerlifting. I always competed drug-free. Back then, there was an organization called the ADFPA, the American Drug-Free Powerlifting Association. I competed from 1987 to 1991. And, I just thought, well, all the heavy lifting that I did when I was young, I probably have a lot of wear and tear on my shoulders. And I can remember I saw a video in recent years before I was doing a lot of the exercises that I'm doing now. And my training was very limited. The lifts that I was doing were very limited. I wasn't doing any barbell benching. And it was a video of Ed Cohn and Mark Bell, and they were talking about the slingshot, to bench press with. And one of them said, I'd always talk to these older guys, and they'd always say, yeah, I used to barbell bench when I was younger, but now I can't do it anymore. So they would use this slingshot to, help them bench because they had so much shoulder pain and shoulder problems and shoulder mobility. And I just thought, yep, that's me. And, just did the best I could. So I pretty much did exclusively dumbbells for a while. But before I get into that, I remember when I was a young man, when I first started working out in 1983, 1984, 10th grade, I can remember sitting in my room, reading, back then we didn't have the internet, but I remember reading all these magazines. And Bob Hoffman had a magazine called Strength and Health, which would focus on fitness, health, Olympic lifting, and bodybuilding. And he had another magazine called Muscular Development, which would focus on health, fitness, powerlifting, and bodybuilding. And then Perry Rader had a magazine called Iron Man. And so a lot of these magazines would feature some of the silver era bodybuilders and some of the weightlifters from that era. And so, a lot of these guys, they were Olympic lifters that had, they started out Olympic lifting, they got into competing in bodybuilding or physique competition. And, they were strong, had Olympic lifting background, had good physiques. But the three things that would stand out about them was, health, being strong, and having a good physique. And, there's so much of a mentality. I hear so much about, people talking about how lifting weights ruins your joints and tears you up, and don't lift heavy, and you shouldn't lift heavy. And just a few days ago, I was at work and I was going into Publix, and there's a guy who's I'm 55. And so there's a guy who's a little bit younger than me, 52, I think, and I think he used to compete in bodybuilding. He looks real good. I don't know if he's all natural or not. He looks, but he's not nearly as big as I am, but he's, got a good physique, very lean, muscular. And, he said, hey, you look good. And I said, yeah, I lost 30 pounds since August. I went from 244 to 214, and I was kind of telling him about my training. He started, kind of poo-pooing training heavy and training for strength, and I don't care about any of that. And that's good. He's telling me, first off, I am older than he is. Okay, and another thing is, I was powerlifting in my teens and my early 20s. Okay, and I'm 55 now. But he's telling me, hey, I'm telling you, that's going to ruin your joints. You better listen to me. You better listen to me. And so, I didn't tell him, hey, I'm older than you are, but I did remind him that I'm 55. He knew I was older than him. I've been powerlifting since I was in my teens. So, but, I know injuries happen, and that's very unfortunate, and no condemnation. I have compassion on people that have, suffered injuries, and injuries happen even when you train, try to train smart and to the best of your knowledge and stuff like that. But it shouldn't be the mentality, that you're going to ruin your joints, you're going to ruin your health. Something's wrong with that. That shouldn't be the mentality. There's something wrong in the thinking there, and a wrong idea about health, especially if you're all natural, if you're drug free. It shouldn't be ruining your joints. And people always say, well, you shouldn't lift heavy. Well, I don't think anybody should lift heavy all the time. And of course, heavy is relative, but I don't think you should be doing 90% all the time. And if you do it year round, it should be very infrequent. Not a lot of volume, maybe just one set, not grinding and stuff like that. But I assumed a lot of my shoulder problems just wear and tear. And when I competed in powerlifting, I had a good deadlift, and deadlift ended up. When I was in high school, I didn't do lower body; I just did bench, and I did a 445 pause bench in a meet without a bench shirt when I was 19. But deadlift ended up being my best lift. And so, I doubled a 660 and I did a 685 in a meet. And so, but for some reason, I never did rows. I would do deadlifts, stiff-legged deadlifts, and lat pull-downs. And another thing is that I somewhere in there, I stopped training shoulders directly. I just figured, you do incline bench, you do close grip bench, you do all this pressing, your shoulders get a lot of work, whatever. And so I just, and a lot of the training back then in powerlifting circles was, lean toward minimalism. And so I was under that influence or whatever. So I just, for years and years, I did not directly train my shoulders. So, so when I got older and I started training again for health reasons, not powerlifting, not anything close to powerlifting. I'm not powerlifting now, but if you ever competed in powerlifting, you're, no matter what you do, you're always a powerlifter. I'm not saying that, but that's how people think. So, but I would just train exclusively with dumbbells, no barbells, because the barbell bench would hurt my shoulders. And I said, well, it's just wear and tear. I can't do that. But when the COVID started, I started buying, my own equipment. And so I bought an adjustable bench and I bought dumbbells. And the only exercise I could think of that would work my upper back, my lats, was one-arm dumbbell rows, which I never liked doing rowing because it was so subjective, with how much body English and are you cheating, and so I just didn't like it. I didn't do them. But I started doing them and I liked them, and lo and behold, I before that I was always tweaking my shoulders. I'd be dumbbell benching and I'd tweak my shoulders and have to take a few weeks off till it got better again. And I started working with a low incline bench to get in some shoulder work. But I was tweaking my shoulders all the time. Well, when I bought my own equipment after COVID and I started doing one-arm dumbbell rows, I stopped tweaking my shoulders. Well, what was happening was my rear delts were starting to get some work. And so, what I'm saying is oftentimes with older guys, it's not wear and tear. It's not a shoulder injury. It's it's a muscle imbalance or it's weak shoulders. After a while, I kept training, working out, and I started wanting to do barbell bench. Now, here's what a lot of guys do, and here's what I used to do. You put on 135, for a bench press. You haven't barbell benched in a while, and you do a few reps or whatever, and whether the weights feels easy or not, but it hurts. And so you say, oh, this hurts my shoulders. I can't do it. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. Or you put on some kind of plate on the overhead on the front seated front press or behind the neck press, and you do that and you say, oh, that hurts. My shoulders are bad. It hurts my shoulders. I can't do that. Don't do that. Don't put a plate on. Start with a bar. When I first started doing barbell bench press, I could not get the barbell to touch my chest. Say, oh, that's a lack of mobility. Your shoulders are. Well, I kept working with the bar, and I just work on my mobility. 3 sets of 10. I do everything else. At the end of my workout, I take the bar and I do 3 sets of 10. Try to work on mobility. Try to get that range of motion down. Get my tendons, my joints, my stabilizers used to doing that range of motion. And then I would add 5 pounds. And I just kept adding 5 pounds, just kept adding 5 pounds. And so now, and I hear all the time, and this is another topic, but I hear people say, that wide grip benching is bad for your shoulders and stuff like that. And, you get just as much, pec activation with a narrower grip. And I hope that's true. I hope that's true, but I don't feel like that's true. I don't think that's really true. I think you get, I think you get better. I think you get better pec activation with a wider grip, even if it's rougher on your shoulders. But what I'm saying is that I'm a 55-year-old guy. I was powerlifting, in my teens, okay, and competed. There was, yes, to be fair, there was a lot of years where I didn't do any training at all, so I didn't incur, a lot of wear and tear like some other people. But, I still do, wide grip. I do, about a 31-inch grip, middle finger on the rings, and doesn't hurt my shoulders. But I worked myself up to that point. I don't max. I don't do sets of 5. I don't do sets of 3. I do sets of 10. I try to make them smooth, and I don't grind. And but I feel like it works the pecs more. So, add weight to the bar slowly. And another thing I want to share. Okay, I mentioned earlier that, and I haven't even really covered this in this up to this point yet. I mentioned it, but I didn't cover it. When I was young, somewhere in there, before I got into powerlifting, I stopped working shoulders directly. You say, well, that's really stupid or whatever, but I did, and a lot of exercises would hurt my shoulders, and so I just quit. And when I got older, I didn't do them at all. And recently, when I was I was doing wide grip and I was benching and stuff like that, and I know my lifts are nothing to write home about, but the fact is that I am doing the lifts. I wasn't doing these lifts. I didn't think I could. I didn't feel like I was able to do them. I didn't feel like I had the range of motion, the mobility. I was in too much pain. It hurt me too much. I feel like I was damaging myself. So I wasn't even doing these lifts a few years ago. But when I would bench, my shoulders would always hurt. And I just said, yeah, my shoulders are, it's wear and tear or whatever. But recently I was listening to an interview, and I hate to put in plugs, and it's not a plug, but also I want to give credit. I was listening to an interview with Alpha Destiny and Bald Omni-Man, and he said, I heard him say near the end of the interview, Bald Omni-Man said, yeah, a lot of guys, their shoulders will hurt, and because their shoulders are weak, and they start training their shoulders, and their shoulders stopped hurting. And when I heard that, I said, that is me. That is my problem. Something clicked. So I started working my overhead press. I started work off seated overhead press off of pins, and I started working my lateral raises, and I started working my rear delts on a reverse pec deck, and my shoulder pain went away, and my bench started moving. So anyway, I hope this was helpful to some of you out there. I would really like to see some older guys that haven't been able to do what they want to do, and think that their shoulders are too tore up, be able to start lifting again and be able to train more effectively. So I wish you everyone the best. Thank you for listening.